how bad is alcohol long term? So we're first going to talk on basically chronic drinking, or when it comes to that, non-moderate drinking and otherwise. So how bad is alcohol long term? And this really depends on your overall consumption rate. So if you are somebody who's drinking moderately, it won't be nearly as bad. We will discuss that in a second, kind of some of the potential benefits and downsides of moderate drinking. But heavy drinking, there is a large amount of known issues with heavy drinking. One of the first ones that you can think of is actually like liver failure. So this is when you talk about people having cirrhosis of the liver. This is exactly from over drinking alcohol. One of the reasons because of this, we'll actually discuss a little bit later in the podcast, but liver failure, liver damage, especially if you're drinking a large amount of alcohol, is extremely prevalent. In addition to this, poor sleep. This is something that a lot of people don't realize when you consistently drink heavy. And also another thing about this I should say too is that even if you are drinking moderately, your sleep will be affected, but especially if you are heavy drinking, drinking a large amount of alcohol, and we'll define kind of what that means in a second, your sleep is going to be compromised tremendously. And you may say to myself, I fall asleep fine. I have no issues when I drink alcohol. But the problem isn't that you fall asleep fine, it's actually the quality of your sleep. So the different cycles of sleep are heavily affected, and especially the ones where you get deep restorative sleep, those are very, very highly correlated and affected with drinking alcohol. In addition to this, another thing can be decreased mood. Mood can be such a big definition of what it really means, but when I say mood, I basically mean your emotions around others, your vigor through the day. So, if you're drinking quite a lot, you might not have quite as good as interpersonal communications and connections with people. So that's a huge thing to note. Alcohol long-term drinking, also, we know this too, this is why people have DUIs, is it leads to a large increase in motor vehicle accidents. And this is something that's really sad because a lot of times when people get put on, let's say they go to trial for a homicide-related motor vehicle accident from drinking, sometimes a lot of people get off easy on this, and it's really unfortunate because these chronic drinkers are leading to these motor vehicle accidents. So again, another reason to potentially avoid drinking, especially heavy drinking, but just drinking in general, is when you're out on the road, you're not nearly as safe. Not only for yourself, you could potentially get into a huge accident and die, but you're affecting a lot of lives as well too. In addition to this, how bad is alcohol long term? Your body fat. Oh, this is something that a lot of people want to know, and we'll talk a little bit further in the podcast about some different ways you can maybe drink and minimize body fat gain, but this is something that happens with a lot of people, increased body fat. And again, we'll discuss kind of some of the mechanisms behind that later, but increased body fat usually goes hand in hand, even with moderate drinking. And again, I'll describe why on that in a second. One of the things that's really coming out with alcohol is the effects on brain health. So even if you are somebody who is drinking moderately, there can be some issues with brain health, which is kind of crazy because a lot of people have thought that there might be some protective mechanisms, which was the case, but some new research is coming out on that. So especially if you are over drinking chronically, brain damage is basically imminent. You're filling your body with toxins, and specifically your brain, which is the part that helps control everything in the body. It's getting affected by alcohol use, especially chronic heavy drinking. In addition to this, depression. So when we talk about alcohol is actually classified as a depressant type drug. So it slows down your central nervous system. And because of this, it literally is a depressant, which means the more you take it in, especially chronically long term, it can lead to literal depression. A couple other things when it comes to how bad is alcohol chronically: increased chances of blood pressure increased chances of heart disease. And this is more for the person who is drinking a large amount of alcohol. So we're talking about that like heavy binge drinking, right? Moderate, maybe not quite as bad, but still there are some risks, especially with your overall blood pressure, your blood work, and chances of getting heart disease. In addition to this, cancer risk, if it couldn't get any worse. Alcohol, chronically drink, can increase the risk of different cancers, specifically breast cancer, maybe even colon and esophageal cancer. So this is kind of the cancers in our gastric system or our GI. So basically, if you think about consuming alcohol, it's got to go in through your esophagus, down through your stomach, into your intestinal tract, and out your colon. And, or I should say, not out your colon, but it affects some of the food being processed in there. Basically, your entire digestive system will get affected by that, and you can increase the cancer risk of those associated parts of it.